So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage, so then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yirmiyahu the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As in always, we find then the prophecies of Yirmiyahu very true. We then understand the spring feast, the autumn feast, found in the 61st chapter of Yirmiyahu the prophet, and also Leviticus the 23rd chapter. And these truly gives us the understanding of the times and the seasons. So the Messiah himself, and we understand his name is and was and shall be forever Yahweh Yeshua. That's where he comes from. He comes from the Creator himself. So then as we read these holy instructions, firstly, we should be concerned with the salvation of our own souls. What then is required from a person to save the soul? Prior of going to these prophecies, we should be aware that this world will be destroyed. Because of these, the importance of leaders coming to power is not as important as a personal choice of saving the soul. As we read, for instance, prophecies of Yirmiyahu, and then the completion of the spring feast of the Messiah, and then we read, for instance, in Yohanan, bearing fruit. In order for a person then to become saved, first a person must be aware of tabernacling. That's the main point. The Creator himself decided of having Moses, from the Hebrew language Moshe, and then he was involved with bringing the holy instructions and then teaching the people. Because of these, the Israelites, back then they were simply the Hebrews, then they were taken out of Egypt, nicely and organized, because the Creator is never for destruction and disaster if people of the region have no idea of his holy person. Egypt was never destroyed by any kind of a plague. And say this once again, so then we take the myth away from the minds of the people. Egypt never had 10 plagues. What went on during the time of Pharaoh, it is absolutely similar as what then the king of Babylon had. So let's make this extremely clear. There were never 10 plagues in Egypt. There are movies, many kinds of movies of the past, and some of them modern. These movies, they don't have a clue what they are talking about. The Creator himself would never destroy a nation without giving proper understanding, either via prophets or removing the chosen people of the Creator himself out of the place. But the Creator always gives a chance for a nation to have their own souls saved. So then as we read the understanding of Moses, he was sent to Egypt, and there he wanted his people, Yahweh's people, to come out of Egypt. Every night, then Pharaoh had a dream. But those dreams were very real, as if he was in the midst of the story himself. That's why then later on, when Pharaoh said, "You can go over there, speak with the people precisely as you have spoken with me. Not above, not below." And Moses said exactly what he said to Pharaoh, he said to the people. So then roughly 600,000 people came out of Egypt, nicely organized. The rest of them stayed behind. So when we read from non-original manuscripts, you find then the whole nation came out of Egypt and they plundered the Egyptians. It's an absolutely BS of the worst kind. Creator Yahweh would never destroy Egypt in these terms. As these roughly 600,000 people, these people believed what Moses said. Then they were granted exit out of Egypt. There they went to the desert, and there then they practiced Yahweh's instructions for 40 years. Then they went to the promised land. Then they received more holy instructions through the prophets. And then the Messiah came centuries later. Thus, the Messiah completed the spring feast, found in Leviticus the 23rd chapter from the 1st verse through the 21st verse. He completed it. Then he went to the Sheol or Inferno on our behalf for 72 hours. He came back. Then he spent another year with his people, teaching them precisely what to do and how to behave during the time of the feasts. Because the objective was teaching the people how to maintain the feast of the autumn season. Because the Messiah himself said, as you do this, then the Messiah would come in this time. So the people were very aware of the holy feast of autumn. Then, roughly 100 years later, the first holy city on the land of Cush, and the holy cities were the focus point of the entire leadership of this world. The holy cities had the wisdom, the understanding, and the prophets, and the 7 spirits of Elohim were amongst those Hebrews. They would come out of the cities at certain times of the day, and they would be ministering to the people. Teaching, however, was not done by the holy Hebrews. Teachings were done via those who were involved with testifying, and testifying are done by the Gentiles. The Gentiles were responsible for testifying on behalf of the Messiah in bringing then the people close to the holy cities. These were the objectives. So then, because of these, we read then the understanding of Yohanan. And then the Messiah himself is the vine. And then other people, the Gentiles, are then the branches. And directly related with these understanding comes the Messiah first, and the Hebrews then are the primary branches, and then we Gentiles are grafted in a vine. And then we must bear fruit. Independently what the world is doing as far as its leadership of this nation, the other nation, or the other nation, the holy people, they are representatives of the world, and then they are representatives of the kingdom to come government. Because of these, then we shift our understanding. After we are then saved, we say our faults, then we are mikvad or baptized, and we renew our minds as per the instructions of Shaliach Shaul, in renewing our minds with the holy instructions, and they are then the 5 Megillas of Moses. Those are the bases. So then, 24th chapter of Metutiahu, he was a Levite, very acquainted with the services of the Holy Temple. Let's understand what the Messiah then is explaining. Because the Messiah was then his people were concerned regarding the temple. First, the people wanted to make him king. And the kind of kingship they were thinking of was not the kind the Messiah was thinking of. And then the Messiah was explaining then the main power of the city that was the temple. And the Messiah said, not a stone is going to be left upon another. And he said, you people are deceived. And then the Messiah explained why. As we read then sections of this portion, what do we understand of the time of the end? So then the Messiah is explaining the 24th chapter of Metutiahu, and it was during his 12 months of teaching. This was not done during his completion of the spring feast. This was done after, because during the time he was completing the spring feast, he himself said, it's not for you to know the times and the seasons at this point. But then people, they get overly proud, and people have condescending spirit. Some people, they think themselves higher than the holy instructions. But the Creator always, he knows how to play the game. And he gives a time until people, they come to their senses and understand they must be saved. When people are proud and they refuse to understand, later on, the Creator himself, he knows how to do the work. And most often than not, then when a person is cornered, then it's not very nice. But let's then understand what's going on as far as the Messiah himself. There he was, explaining then, while he sat in the Mount of Olives, his disciples drew near and were saying among themselves, and said to him, so then say to us, of these situations regarding then the time of the end and the sign of your coming. Okay, the sign of your coming and the end of the world. These were the words the people were asking because they were being taught during the time of his 12 months after he came from the dead. And the Messiah said to them, be aware, let no man deceive you. Why did he say, let no man deceive you? Let's read the first portion. First verse. And the Messiah went out of the temple to depart, and his disciples drew near and were showing him the construction of the temple. What were the objectives in the minds of the disciples when they saw the Messiah coming out of the temple to depart, and his disciples drew near and were showing him the construction of the temple? The people, they were saying, we together, we can vote for you and you can become the king. The Messiah sensed in the air the disciples wanted to make him king, a political figure of his time. He sensed instantly. But he said to them, behold, don't you observe these things? Truly I say to you, not a stone is going to be left unturned. So the Messiah then, the disciples were expecting him to say, oh yes, absolutely, let's go over there and start up a campaign of the Messiah. We have miracles and we have these and that and the other, and we can talk to the people and put up a vote, and then they can make him king. There it is, the temple is yours. And the Messiah did not give not even an inch of this understanding, but he said, don't you observe these stones? Not a stone is going to be left upon another. Before the disciples could open their mouth as far as nominating him for the position in the temple, and then governor, and then king, the Messiah already, in quote, threw a bucket of iced water on them. And then he said, not a stone is going to be left upon another. And the Messiah, then he sat in the Mount of Olives with his disciples and drew near and was saying among themselves and said to him, so then, we understand you do not want to become a political figure in our land. So then please say, when this situation is going to take place, then the sign of your returning. You understand the tone of the conversation? And then the Messiah said to them, be aware, let no man deceive you. He's already giving an indirect kick in the rear regarding the first verse. For many will come in my name. What they were thinking, what those disciples were thinking, they were thinking of going around and using his name for the purposes of nominating a person to become king. For many will come in my name. The objective was this. The disciples were using his name. They were being very prudent in doing so, but they saw the results. But the Messiah did not want them to use his name for their purposes. And he said, I'm the Messiah, this and that and the other, because he knew out of these, if he would then let these people do what they wanted, then many Messiahs would come out of their own. And many they will deceive. For you are bound to hear of war and rumors of wars. Now, the situation is this. Please gives us what is then the sign of your coming. He's explaining a section of history related with our time. If we understand the situation as in our time, because he said, the disciples said, at the coming of yourself, or of your second coming, and the signs of your coming. So these places are precisely where we are at, after 2009 and until 2032. That's the period of time. And what else he said? For you are bound to hear of war. Why should it be only war? What has the prophet Yishmanel said regarding then the place beyond the rivers of Ethiopia? He's explaining of the violent ones. That's where should be war. Only. The rest, only rumors of wars. Because these are directly related with tabernacling. We understand Sudan is at war. But on this land, at some point, tabernacling must return. And then, when the area is stabilized, the only war left is in Congo, beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. The region over there beyond the rivers of Ethiopia must be at war. Watch out and do not be disturbed. When this time comes, do not be disturbed. Because the Messiah knows it's going to be very fearful times until the holy city on the land of Cush is then completed. For it is required that these situations take place, but the time is not yet. He's giving a time where there is a slot, time and a place for organizing these holy cities, and then a very short, brief period of peace and prosperity. Some people say this world won't ever have peace and prosperity. Oh yes, we will. For a short time, we will. Because the Creator is going to show the world how then the new world is going to be during His governmentship. It has to show the people via His holy cities that this world can be at peace, so people can understand how it's going to be in the future. Then, when the time is not yet, then he explains further. For nation will to rights against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and plagues and earthquakes in many places. But these situations are only the starting. Then they will deliver you to troubles, and they will destroy you, and will hate you from many nations because of my name. Then the Messiah is given a period of time related with where they were at until the first 1,000 years. You can understand by the way he's explaining. The first, he said, war and rumors of wars do not be disturbed because the time is not yet. Then there is a gap of time. Then he said, for nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. Then the rest of the statue of Daniel must be completed. And they will hate you from many nations because of me. Then many will arise, stumble, and will hate one another, and betray one another, and many false prophets will arise and deceive many. And because of the growth of iniquity, those who are from the lineage, they won't anymore encourage staying on a path. Then whoever has patience until the end will have life. And these great news, explaining of the completion of the spring feast and the holy cities giving directives, must be known in the entire world, and a testimony. Gentiles working on behalf of the Messiah. Then the time will come. So he is explaining the area where we are at versus then the time that they were at until 1009, the 1,000 years of the Messiah. Then there is obviously a jump, because comes 1,000 years of deceit we have come out of in 2009, and then our period of time. And then the Messiah explains, and when you observe the sign of desolation, the abomination that makes desolate, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, what does it mean? As we understand at this time, we should then halt this important holy reading and then come to the understanding of our time in politics and religion. And these we shall come back later and continue on this study. Because understanding what Daniel said is extremely important, because Daniel also prophesied in the 11th chapter regarding the covenant. So then, what's going on in the world? Firstly, as we read the prophecies, we find then Egypt in the very midst of this entire situation. You find the 11th chapter of Daniel, Egypt then receiving arms from the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is returning and must produce arms. Later on, they will come out with much equipment for the war of the end. As Egypt then receives these arms, and then Egypt takes control of the region, this means that protests in Cairo and many other places must be crushed. You can read. When we read from the Holy Instructions, you find then Egypt then stabilizing the area and then going south and then returning. We know ISIL, they are very dangerous at this time. They are imposing their own religion by force of any kind. But then they're going to clash, or they're going to throng themselves with Egypt. Hagar was Egyptian. The Arab world, they have the lineage from Egypt, liking it or not. So Egypt is the apex and the focus of the entire Arab world. That's where they came from. They came from the relationship of Hagar and Ibrahim. Obviously, Egypt must stabilize itself and crush the wars against them, and then stabilize the region so then China can come and do its work. Then ISIL, after thronging a bit with Egypt, then they retrieve. And then they gather a multitude of forces, and then they go against them once more. Why? Simply because the stabilization of Egypt is going to give them ways of the West where they can get, if you read the article, aid from the United States. What these returning of ISIL later with a great multitude against Egypt, it's because of these relationships with the West. But Egypt at the end of it comes out victorious. However, they must break ties with the West. Thus then China, the Soviet Union, and then the Kingdom of the South are then united. So then, later on, there are more layers related with this until we reach the covenant. Before this covenant comes the standing for the establishment of the vision. The vision is tabernacle in the land of Cush. That's where the first tabernacle of our time is going to be at. Because of these, then the violent ones, they're going to have skirmishes with the ISIL as they gather themselves in a great multitude. Because then the Islamic world, they're going to take over. But the Africans, they understand that there is a promise. And they are going to form groups, so then this establishment of the vision then can be received, and then understandings for the world then comes out of the first holy city. Beyond this point, let's say the holy city is already firm, and then the sons of Yishmanel, they are doing their trade, they are united with China, the links are already done, computers for many persons over there, in many households, and then China is then obviously flowing through the area in the Middle East, bringing prosperity to thousands. Then, later on, there is a problem. Then the U.S. is out of the deal. then the only resource left for the United States is joining with Israel. Tabernacle is already set up. It's closed and then active as it was during the time of Yohanan. Then the United States understands there is no place anymore for it, because China has stabilized the Middle East, and then there is no place for the United States. So their only recourse is retrieve. As they do this, a bit prior they have to make relationship with Israel concerning the temple. That's where then the relationship of Gog and Magog takes place. Then there is the false representative of the covenant, and Daniel 9 explains the area related with 24th chapter and the abomination that makes desolate, mixed with the understanding of the holy seat being anointed. These then is going to become so strong, and at this time the holy city is so popular. These false representatives of Israel, of the unbelieving Israel, they're going to try to reinstitute the sacrifices of the first tabernacle service, thus making it an abomination that makes desolate. Desolate means death. There is no life that comes out of these rituals. But they're going to emphasize these. Thus, when we read them later, and both of them are going to be joint, and they shall deceive. Because you have tabernacle on the land of Cush, of the second tabernacle services, the completion of the first and the establishment of the second. You have a second anointing upon the holy city as promised by Yishmanel the prophet. But then you find the unbelieving Israel trying to stabilize first the Holy Land with the temple. We understand it is the Dome of the Rock as a Muslim shrine. Israel wants at any cost to destroy this shrine and then rebuild the temple. The Arabs won't let. When the time comes, what we can find is only the tent of the desert must be on Mount Moriah. And when we understand the relationship of the United States and Israel, Gog and Magog, many of the people that believed on the land of Cush and the city there, they're going to start drifting away. And then at this point in time, then the U.S. is already linked with the Chinese system. And as we read the 11th chapter, you find in great wealth coming from this relationship. Because USD then is involved with the linking of many nations, but the situation is the main problem with nations is having the USD as their only main exchange. And because US has a direct link with China, obviously they charge higher yields from the exchange. That's how they're going to get much wealth from. And then the covenant. Then you find the skirmishes of those people who are on the land of Cush from the real second tabernacle services, and that's where the Creator himself is at, versus the unbelieving Israel where Satan is at, because trying to understand, the 1,000 years of deceit is the 1,000 years of Satan. And also Satan would have 1,000 years. And then Satan, obviously, he comes out of the U.S. and joins himself with the unbelieving Israel and United States, thus then promoting the false prophet. Because of this relationship, and then goes back and forth, then we have the proof of it when you read the 11th chapter of Daniel. And this relationship of the United States and the unbelieving Israel is going to generate animosity amongst the nations of the world, and then U.S. must retrieve for once. Then U.S. is no longer a force to be reckoned with in the world. Then the only situation left is then the first tabernacle service, represented by the unbelieving Israel. You have United States, symbolized by the false prophet, or the Christian world, because secures the observance of a day not instructed by Moshe. And the third, you have then the temple. And from these religious understandings, many skirmishes will take place. But these are explaining in a way that you can understand religion. As far as trade, the world is prospering beyond measure. So since we have a bit of understanding of what's coming in the next at least 10 years ahead of us, what can we understand what's going on today? So then, there's a very important information regarding then the Arab world. The Saudis are then giving the world a gift: lower prices for crude. Welcome to the second transition. Why we say second transition? As the sons of Yishmanel via Isel, they are uniting themselves for the purposes of then showing the teachings of the Quran. Though they are very strong in what they believe, they are going to be joined with the Arab world, and then lowering the prices of crude is going to give them the total power of trade, as far as they themselves can do to help the trade of China to move forward. These should give then the freighters of this earth then great deals of prices and stability in the market. As nations, they are then obviously, they make the log on themselves in their computers. They can buy, they can get products, they can send money, they can receive money from banks, and they can do investments via the same line. Then when they request their products, their packages, always at their places. And the Arabs then having a very strong hand regarding then this flow of trade worldwide. This is the first. What else is going on? As far as Egypt, lots of protests going on. The Egyptians must understand, if they continue on these protests without having a solid plan of stabilizing the region, they are going to be crushed. What else is going on in the world? The Greco country, can you believe it, where Jesus Christ comes from, is again bankrupt, and they won't be able to last for very long. Another bailout for this country that invented Jesus Christ. Welcome to the false Messiah. Not even the country he came from is able to stabilize itself. And then comes Brazil, involved with so many skirmishes, and it was found out a few days ago that this new candidate, Neves, he has a very intriguing kind of future economy ties. He wants to re-establish the ties with the United States and becoming slave of the USD. let's say this once again. The new candidate Neves, that is obviously against Dilma, he wants the establishment of a relationship with the United States, become dependent of the USD. Not only this, but as we understand, Mr. Romney from the United States is then having his strength and capacities, and he wants to become the next president. What is it going to generate? As he's coming then, as in Daniel, the gold that came from Daniel is coming with such a force and such a might that he wants to kick Obama out of his place. And he will establish a budget for the country. You can be sure of it. And at this very time, US is printing money like a festival. So the exchanges of the world, they are not sensing very much. But then when the US halts printing money, can you understand what's going to take place? Can you understand how US is going to pay for these wars? And this Neves guy, he wants 100% relationship with the US, and then Brazil is going to bear the burden also of paying for these wars. But not only this, he wants ties with the European Union is stagnated, and the Greco country already bankrupt, wanting a bailout. Then he wants our money from Brazil to go over there, and then doing trade with the European Union already stagnated and bankrupt. So what this can say of this guy? He doesn't have an understanding of the world's market and what's going on in the world. And he likes only the rich people and huge companies. Is that a great deal for Brazil? Absolutely not. China has proven the economy that's saving the world. And we have already strong ties with China, and there is 70 times 12 digits the Chinese is holding back because of these politics. And this existing government can truly deal with China. So if people want a future for this country, they should vote for Dilma. Because this Neves is going to turn this country to the rich people, and then is going to become simply a piece of junk. We already have a very weak economy. We are the weakest of the BRICS bloc. Our government is not able to deal with the economy of the world. And having a center-right president is going to be absolutely disastrous. Because he's going to places where both of them are bankrupt. The US is bankrupt. And he's going to give our country in the hands of the Americans then to get the money from the exchange of the USD to pay for the wars.